Hey everybody, a few weeks ago I asked for your cooking questions and the response was overwhelming. 43 different questions on cooking. I'm not sure I knew there were that many, but I want to try and get to answer as many of them. But the number one question that I got was about seasonings, herbs and spices, and using seasonings in your cooking. The first thing I want to tell you is don't put too much emphasis on this. The idea of herbs and seasonings is to bring out the natural flavor of your foods. You're not going to cook a choux and then put a whole bunch of thyme and oregano on it and go, wow, that's really good. Don't depend so much on the seasonings. The seasonings, like I've always said, are the artist's signature at the end of the dish. It's the thing that brings out those natural flavors, not creates a flavor in itself. And here is a basic definition for you. I go into this in great detail in my web cooking classes, but there's a difference between seasoning and flavoring. Seasoning is bringing out the natural flavors of the food. Flavoring is adding an entirely new flavor. An example would be sprinkling some salt and pepper on a chicken breast, still tastes like chicken, versus putting it in a heavy cream sauce or a heavy sherried sauce or something. It could be chicken, it could be tofu, it could be a lot of things. You've added an entirely new flavor. But to get your herbs and seasonings, your flavorings for your food down, what I want to do is tell you two different ways that I think about it. So let me take you over to my spice cabinet over here, and I'll show you how I organize my seasonings so that I can cook either in a cultural fashion or to match to certain ingredients. When I group my seasonings into cultural flavors, one of the first is Italy, and one of the ones that I use most often is oregano, garlic, and basil. These three are what I would consider my Italian team. Now, they can certainly be dried seasonings like that. You can use some fresh garlic and fresh basil and fresh oregano. But if I'm going to cook with tomatoes, or I'm going to do a marsala, or I'm going to use tomato sauce and mozzarella cheese, anything that I create that is of an Italian fashion is going to have basil, oregano, and garlic. That's the first group that I put together in my head. Now, let's say I'm going to make a Mexican dish. I'm going to do some enchiladas or some burritos or something along those lines, something of a Latin or South American flavor. Cumin and coriander are two of the mainstays of this type of cooking. And if you were to take the top off the cumin and give it a sniff, it would smell like Taco Bell to you. It would smell like taco or Mexican seasoning. Thyme very often as well. I'm going to consider this my Latin or Mexican team. Now let's say I want to go to a different part of the world and cook in an Indian fashion. There are certain seasonings, they're not basil and oregano necessarily, but if I wanted to cook in an Indian fashion, I might consider some curry powder. And of course you can make your own curry powder. Curry powder is not a single seasoning, it's a combination of seasonings, but things like turmeric, nutmeg, cloves, allspice, all these very earthy, hearty seasonings would be part of your Indian team. Let's say we want to cook in a Spanish style. We want to go to Spain and we might use something like a cocoa mole rub or some cocoa powder. This actually it happens to be French cocoa powder, but some kind of cocoa powder to make your Spanish mole, and maybe some saffron, Spanish saffron. You can't make a bouillabaisse or some kind of Spanish dish without a little bit of saffron as well. These are seasonings that are characteristic to certain areas of the world, certain countries, and you can add that flavor to any kind of dish by using these specific seasonings. So a quick trip around the world to put different seasoning ideas in your head if you want to cook in a certain style or in a certain region. I went to culinary school in Baltimore. I always make sure I have Old Bay for my crab and seafood. This is something that I enjoy. You might have some jerk seasoning to cook in a Jamaican style if you'd like. I also keep wasabi powder. This is great for Japanese cuisines. Some black sesame seeds for garnishing. You only need one or two of these characteristic items to cook in that cultural fashion. The second is the ingredients themselves. Certain herbs and seasonings go with chicken better than they do with beef. Certain go with beef better than chicken. Some are things that you've created yourself entirely, and that's the ultimate goal, to create your own combinations of seasonings that you like. But then if you're just cooking straight down the middle, you're not cooking in any specific fashion, you need to match it to the ingredient. And here's my poultry team. If I'm cooking a turkey or chicken or even duck or quail or something like that, sage, thyme, and sometimes tarragon. Good 3 combination for poultry. Usually if I'm cooking beef, I like the flavor of thyme and rosemary in beef. Think about a beef roast coated with those rosemary quills on top, a prime rib, or even a pork loin. Thyme and rosemary are my beef team. I love the flavor of dill with fish, and this jar is ugly because it's dill that I dried myself. I got a whole bunch of dill last year, dried it in the oven, crushed it, and made my own seasoning. Saved a lot of money, but dill with shrimp and fish, outstanding. Tarragon as well. These are a little bit lighter seasonings that go with the more delicate flavor of fish, dill and tarragon. So aside from trying to match your seasonings to either a cultural flavor that you're trying to achieve or just matching it to the ingredients, when you start to put your seasoning cabinet together and think of teams, of Italian oregano and basil, of turmeric curry powder allspice for Indian food, cumin coriander for Mexican food, you have a starting point. You know a flavor profile that goes with that cultural cuisine. So your challenge is not only copying what I do or trying to use the seasonings to recover your entire dish, but find out the combinations of herbs and seasonings that work best for you, either in your goal to make chicken taste more like chicken or in your goal to make chicken taste like a Mexican dish or an Indian dish, starting with a combination in your head of the flavor that you would like in your mouth is the best way to start using your seasonings.